Hello, and welcome to the SaWGuy podcast.
Like scary movies. What's your favorite scary movie?
Here's Johnny.
We'll tear your soul apart.
The boogeyman is real, and you found him.
Game over, man. Game over.
What do you want?
I want to hear you scream. From the front time, bitch!
Welcome to the SaWGuy podcast. As always, I'm the SaWGuy, bringing you episode 9. I can't do that with my fingers. Wait, hold on. 9. So I got a good episode, but I always have good episodes, right? I'm going to be talking about sci-fi horror. Ooh, all the science bullshit stuff that goes in with it. But, when I was researching this episode, I was thinking, what makes a good sci-fi horror film? Like, what list do you have that would make it, like, fit that theme, Because I was getting that a lot. Well, I'm going to tell you right now, the most obvious ones are Alien, Predator, But there's also another classic of mine that I like that I might do an episode on later. They Live. I also wrote down The Fly. You got to include The Fly. Cloverfield, I'm just giving it to you because they just, had a movie put on Netflix for it. Reanimator, Night of the Creeps, Faculty. Ooh, that's another good one, right? Event Horizon, the first Terminator. Now, I'm going to get a lot of shit for this one. The first Terminator had a lot of horror into it. You had a killer robot, time travel, and you had a lot of weird science fiction of, like, end of the world. That's a perfect recipe for a horror film. A sci-fi horror film, if that, right? And then also I put down The Thing, The Blob, zombies in a sense, like 28 Days Later, Resident Evil, scientific experiment gone wrong, that kind of bullshit. Daybreakers, which is another really good, sophisticated, like, vampire movie. Had science into it, so I had to include that. And then, of course, once it gets stale for some franchises, we all have to talk about Hellraiser Bloodline, where he's randomly in space in the future. Jason X, and there's a reason why he's up there. And Leprechaun 4, which I don't understand how the fuck the Leprechaun got in space. But, we'll discuss all that later. And then also, too, Kevin Bacon's famous role as the Invisible Man and Hollow Man. But, honestly, what makes a good sci-fi film is the fact that you have all those horror elements into it, You can't talk about a science fiction horror film if it doesn't have killing, if it doesn't have some weird kind of time travel shit. You also got to include a killer robot, aka Terminator. But there's a lot of other things, too, that I noticed about them. Like, there's a lot that has to do with the fear and the unknown. Quietness, like how it is now. Right? And then anything that has to do with something out of this world or ordinary or aliens coming into our world, that kind of shit. Like The Predator. Which really astonishes me because Alien, I thought, was... I don't know if I could do like a top list of what is the best sci-fi horror film. Because I know people are going to ask me. But I'm going to tell you right now. They're all great in their own world, But if I had to choose between all the sci-fi horror films, if you want truly scientific science ones, you have to go with Aliens. Aliens was good for so many reasons because when they talked about the xenomorphs, the aliens, a lot of people don't know the names of them, but they're xenomorphs. When you talk about them, they were these weird-ass creatures that had a little tiny mouth that spat out and, killed whoever. And they were more tutorial. They were out of this world. And they never really explained it in the original Aliens. In 1, 2, 3, even in Resurrection. I mean, they kind of talked a little bit about it, but not so much until you got the off-sequels of, like, Prometheus. And then the more recent Alien Covenant that came out. They might have explained a little bit about it, but not a whole lot. But what I liked about those movies, if you go down to the roots of it, a lot of it, like even including the video game plays perfect homage to it. It's where you're basically in a dark hallway, right? You hear something, but you don't know what it is. And all of a sudden, just boom, xenomorph gets you. That's, to me, is what makes it really good as a sci-fi horror film. Because in space, we don't know what the fuck goes on, But I would say that would have to be the top film up there, But, when you talk about a good sci-fi horror film, not only does it have to have the horror aspect of it, but most of them, you're going to have to tie in with your actions, your gun shooting shit. There's going to be some that have a lot of dialogue to explain, and either it's dialogue throughout the whole movie, or there's a lot of action, but there's a lot of dialogue built up to it. Case in point, like Predators, the one that Robert Rodriguez did. That was a great one. They explained a little bit more. The Predators were hunters. They kidnapped these people that were the best of the best, put them in their own world for survival. And then you had Lawrence Fishburne who came in, and it just kind of drawn out that last hour to it. You know what I'm saying? So some of the films are going to be drawn out. Other ones, like I said, like horror franchises, when they become to get stale, they have to throw out different ideas. So what ideas do? They throw them in space. You know, case in point with Hellraiser. Hellraiser was kind of cool because it was in space, but not really, you know. They did that with the storyline. So basically they're interviewing one of the toy makers' relatives. He's telling his story, and then basically a robot inside the spaceship inside space, they're trying to break open the box or solve it. They break it open, and then Pinhead and everybody comes out. It was basically just one big elaborate trap to where the ship is one big giant ass cube, and then it locks them up at the end. Spoiler alert. But, you know, I would consider that more scientific, more sci-fi horror because of that, you know. But, you know, Jason in Space, that was pretty cool because he was frozen. It was 1,000 years later, and, you know, you got Uber Jason, which was badass. I talked about that in the Jason episode. You know, in case you missed that, it's episode 6. You know, it's still on here on YouTube. Also, too, Leprechaun 4. I feel bad for the Leprechaun series because that was a good series. 1 and 2 were, you know, 3 just got a little out there. 4 is just like, okay, there's no explanation why the fuck he's in space. I don't get that. But I mean, it had a little bit of twists and elements and stuff like that. That was pretty good. Okay, I'll give it to you. The Blob, I say that's more scientific because it has to do with a scientific experiment going wrong. Well, it depends on which version you watch, the old Steve McQueen or the remake. I love the remake because, you know, Johnny Smith's in it, you know, one of my favorite actresses. But anyways, with the Blob, that's more scientific because it has to do with science. They're basically trying to figure out what the fuck is this thing not kidnapping people, but like hovering over people, and then they dissolve them and shit. You know, it's that to me is a good sci-fi film. The Thing was also pretty good because it all had to involve with shit from out of this world. Night of the Creeps, for an example. You know, that was another good one. And Slither. Those, I believe Slither was a remake of it. If I'm wrong, let me know in the comments because I don't, you know, I don't need somebody to tell me like, oh, that wasn't a remake. You know, it's similar. That's all I'm saying. But anyways, with Night of the Creeps, I like that one because it had to do with Out of This World. They basically, you know, hijack the bodies and shit, and then they turn them into kind of like zombie-ish kind of thing. And then they show like the different breakdowns and stuff of it. How they were trying to figure out like, what the hell is this thing inside somebody's body? Like, why are they acting like this? And it was pretty cool, you know, for what it was. But my main focus that I want to say on for sci-fi horror is I got to talk about The Faculty. And the reason why I got to talk about The Faculty because that shit came on TV, and I was just blown away because there was one gem that I completely forgot. It was one of those films that came out in 1998. Maybe 97, 98, around that time frame, the end of the 90s. And you had a shitload of actors that were in there that was pretty good. You know, you had Josh Hartnett, the chick from Fast and the Furious. That was Usher's first film. Robert Patrick. By the way, he plays a good dick role in every movie that he does, but he's a football coach. Spoiler alert. Femke Jensen, she was the one who played Jean Grey in X-Men. Jon Stewart was in there as a teacher, as one of the alien teachers, which is funny. But, that movie was pretty good. I really enjoyed it because it was basically an outer-world alien trying to live in with us, and then slowly take over, and then these group of kids figured it out. You know, it was kind of homage to the 80s. And they figured out that, okay, it's something out of this world. It's not them. It's, you know, something's infecting everybody, and they're turning them different. And eventually, you find out that it's one big alien, and it's the chick, who no one ever would have suspected. And she basically takes over everybody, and it comes down to her and Elijah Wood, and, you know, she eventually gets killed, and everybody who was infected by this alien becomes normal again. Happy ending. And it was pretty cool, pretty good. I enjoyed it. If you've never seen The Faculty, take a look for it. I know you could probably find it like in the $5 section somewhere, but it's one of those rare good films. I was actually impressed with it, and I would see that more as sci-fi horror because it has all the same genre bending stuff with it and all the classic horror traits. You have an alien out of this world. You have weird people, which is the teachers acting weird. You had deaths, and kills, like crazy kills. People getting stabbed in the eye with a pin with coke in it. What the fuck, right? I still trip out to this. Like, what the hell? So they all died because they, like, got around coke or they had coke in them. But they didn't explain too much in that. They just basically said the coke dried them out, kind of like a snail in salt, So, okay, I get it. I'll roll with that. But, honestly, like, with a sci-fi film, it's all about the mystery. It's all about what if. Could this really happen? What if, what if there's life outside space? What if there's alien life that's living among us, Case in point with They Live. I'm not going to get too into They Live because that's a damn good topic. I want to talk about They Live later on. But anyways, with They Live, the whole story with that one, that was basically we were already living alongside aliens. And Rowdy Piper was in it with Keith David. And Rowdy Piper discovered that we're living amongst aliens because he puts on special sunglasses that makes him see like everything black and white, and he could see through everything. Because we couldn't see him as normal people because they had a satellite dish bending fucking light waves and shit. And, the whole movie goes like a conspiracy theory back and forth, but it has a lot of sci-fi twists to it, which is actually really good. I won't spoil it for you, but it's really good. But that is one of the other ones that I thought was really good. It's also, like I said, it's genre bending. It's sci-fi. It's science. It has to tie into that. But what's funny is that you don't see too much of those anymore. I mean, you'll see, like, they'll use science, but they'll kind of twist it up a little bit and do it for supernatural now. You know what I'm saying? Kind of like with The Conjuring. I wouldn't say The Conjuring sci-fi horror, but, I mean, they basically use demonologists, and they do the study of demons and stuff like that, and they kind of tie it in. So, it's one of those things that's kind of dying off, little by little. But you'll still see one or two good ones that come through. I also think, and I know I'm going to get a lot of shit for this one, is I believe Tremors is a sci-fi horror film. Now looking at it, I know, I don't think I said it in the Tremors episode, which is episode 7, by the way. But I also, like, now doing more of the research on this, I was thinking, well, shit, you have to include it as a sci-fi horror film. Why? Because it's something that's odd, something that could be from out of this world, something they never explained. It was killing people. So you have the science side and you have the horror side. You know what I'm saying? And that to me, like, now thinking about it and doing the research for this episode, I was like, oh shit, that's a sci-fi horror film. And you don't, like I said, you don't see much of them anymore. It's kind of like a dying phase. It's kind of like gangster horror films, you know what I'm saying? But there's other horror films that's, I don't know. We're living in an age right now in the late 2000s that basically everything's all kind of changing. And you see the genres changing and stuff like that. More of the sci-fi films that you see now, and I'm going to put my hands down on this, it's all Walking Dead's fault. Walking Dead got everybody all hooked on zombies. So now you have a lot of films that are kind of like zombie related a little bit, It comes out at night. They never said that they were zombies, that they were infected, but they didn't say they were zombies. That's probably like your more recent horror film that's kind of close to science, but it also has to deal with zombies. 28 Days Later, 28 Weeks Later, and Resident Evil series. We all know the whole story of Resident Evil. I'm not going to get into that. It's just basically a virus that outbreaks, turns people into zombies. Similar story with 28 Weeks Later, 28 Days Later. Another one that I thought was pretty good, like the science horror films, would be Doomsday. It's one of those British films that came out. I think, yeah, they did release it in the U.S. Rona Mitra's in it, Bob Hoskins, and a few other big-name actors. But basically, this whole town was infected with something. They quarantined it off, and they just left them there to die. And they thought everybody would die. Well, they had satellite images showing that they were actually still alive. So they sent Rona Mitra, who was an undercover agent, out there. And she comes to find out it's like this end-of-the-world apocalypse thing, kind of like Mad Max, in a way, but more cannibalistic. And I thought it was pretty cool because it was like a search and rescue team. They wanted to find somebody who was immune, how they were immune to shit like that. And that's what makes a good sci-fi film. Now, back to what I was saying about Terminator, because I know I'm already getting shit and probably comments down here like saying, what the fuck, why is Terminator? The first Terminator, okay, let's get it straight. First Terminator was a good sci-fi horror film. And the reason being is because it was so dark, it was so different, it was so unique. A lot of movies in the 80s, you didn't have too much dealing with time travel. And I think the reason why is because they didn't have the technology. The money was there, to make a big budget film, but it wasn't really out there to the point where they could do the technology to make like robots and shit coming after you and things like that. But the way that they did it, because it was James Cameron, and we all know with James Cameron, he has to spend, hella big money on his movies, But anyways, when he did that with Terminator, I thought the story was fucking amazing. Because here, they show the story of how it's the apocalypse, the machines have taken over, things like that. And now that the machines have taken over, they figured, okay, well, we can already win this war if we go back in time and kill the lady, Linda Hamilton's character, and basically prevent her from having John Connor, the guy who leads the resistance against the machines. So you have that whole time travel. It gets confusing because, the way that they were talking about it. Then you have one of the soldiers who go back at the same time to protect her, who ends up being the father of the baby, which is science. I'll just leave it at that. But anyways, the whole story goes that there was a Terminator, a robot they called the Terminator, and he was programmed to kill everybody with the name Sarah Connor. And basically when he goes and kills everybody off, he finds out that there's one left in the phone book, and that's where the whole story goes. But I see it as a horror film because the Terminator, he was this big, brute, crazy motherfucker that just had his way with everybody. Nobody stood in his way. He killed everybody from the gun store owner to, the thugs that get the clothes, people in the club, all that shit, people in the police station. Lance Hendrickson was in that one. A lot of people forget about that. He was in there. Not a big role. I would say more cameo. But the whole aspect of it was actually legit because it was past its time, It was one of those underrated films that just, really blew it out of the water. And I don't know what they did with the sequels, how they turned him from a bad guy to a good guy. I'm not going to get into the whole sequels. But the first one was good because it dealt with a lot of anxiety. It dealt with a lot of that pressure because you're watching the movie and you're thinking, oh shit, he's going to get her. Oh shit, he's going to get her. And then even down to the end when she's crushing him. And the T-800, Arnold Schwarzenegger's skeleton, the robot, was reaching out, still trying to grab her. And for what it was, it's just like it built a lot of good anxiety and pressure and everything into it, That also ties in with Aliens, because Aliens has to deal with a lot of anxiety. You're out there in the middle of nowhere, it's quiet, then something comes out and gets you. Now, Predator, I think, I'm going to have this argument with so many different people. Predator, a lot of people say that's an action film. Okay, I can see that with a lot of gun shooting. But the first Predator, even the second, actually, most of them, I would say, except AVP, the Alien vs. Predator series, it just kind of, went out there a little bit. But with the Predator series, that was good because it built up with the same thing, a lot of anxiety. You don't know what it was. And like I said, it builds up. Then at the end, he reveals himself, takes off the mask, and then it's like, oh shit, it's a freaking alien, And it's a badass one too, if that. And that, to me, that's more sci-fi. I was thinking when I was doing this, like, okay, what sci-fi horror films? I even looked down a list, went to Google. There was some kind of Wikipedia page that showed all the sci-fi horror films. And I was tripping out on it because some of them, they're just not even sci-fi, I was just like, what the fuck? That can't be sci-fi. There was just a long list. There's so many to name. But it just tripped me out with it, Just because of the fact of, like, okay, I can see the first Terminator, but how the hell can you make the second and the third? Because that was more action type, That's my thought. That's my opinion, nobody else's. But if you want to agree with me, great. If not, okay, put it in the comments. Let me know what you guys think. But anyways, I like the sci-fi horror genre, and a lot of people are still going to give me shit, and I'm still probably seeing all these comments right now as we speak. But I like the sci-fi horror because it bends a lot of stuff. I mean, it opens new doors for different things in horror. You know what I'm saying? Like, case in point with Final Destination. Final Destination, I see more of a sci-fi because here you have to have all this chain reaction shit happening for somebody to die. You know, like in the first one, the teacher, she puts her, cracked mug on top of a screen. The screen breaks, the glass goes under her, and then she falls, and then the house catches on fire because the stove was on, and then the knife comes down and hits her in the chest. That's, that's science involved in that shit. You know that, right? So, but I like the fact that sci-fi horror, it bends the rules a little bit. It also changes things. Like The Predator. You would never see a horror film where it showed somebody getting skinned and hanging upside down. You never see that shit, Not only that, what I like about it too is that when you watch sci-fi horror films, especially on TV, I see that shit all the time on TV. All the good stuff is edited out, all the blood, the guts, the gore. But I don't know if you all know this, in science fiction, but sci-fi horror films, if they're a creature like the Predator or aliens, they can show all the gore on them. So if an alien gets shot up a bunch of times, or if the Predator gets shot up and it shows him getting torn up or whatever, and there's blood and guts and shit, if it's green blood, they could show it all day. But at normal human blood, that's FCC for you. It really is. But that's why I like the sci-fi horror films, is because you can see a lot more when you watch TV. It also opens the doors for different types of kills. Case in point, one of my favorite kills off of Predator has to be from part 2. And I like part 2 because there's that part with Gary Busey and Danny Glover. They're fighting. This is between me and him. And all of a sudden, you see the Predator just throw his smart disc out. They're in a butcher shop, so when his thing's going through and cutting, it's cutting all these dead cattle that are right there. And then it cuts right through Gary Busey, and then you see all the blood come down, and then his torso just dropped. It was like, what the fuck was that? Like, that's pretty cool, That kind of opened the doors a little bit more for the normal horror films that they probably couldn't get away with if they tried, But I liked it. I really did. There's other ones too that open up the doors for makeup, for effects guys. Case in point with The Fly. I like The Fly with Jeff Goldblum. I love the original too, don't get me wrong, but the Jeff Goldblum one really kind of put it on the map with him and Gina Davis, and that whole aspect of how they slowly showed him transforming into a fly. That was just like, whoa, because I know I got a strong stomach. Nothing gets me sick. But anyways, I know a bunch of people that were just tripping out at the fact of how slowly you see Jeff Goldblum turning into a fly, how he's throwing up shit and everything like that, and then slowly his skin's starting to fall off, then he turns to a whole fly and all that. And when Gina Davis, puts the double barrel shotgun on him and then blows his brains out, like a lot of people got sick at that because it was the fact that, there was a lot of gore in it. But, if you watch it on TV, they don't block any of that shit out. And they don't block that shit out because it's considered creature-like. So killing creatures is okay, kids, but killing normal human beings on a horror film is not, I'm not saying that's a good thing, I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but it's kind of a double standard, But my point being that I was saying is that The Fly really pushed the boundaries for makeup effects. It really did. Because, here you have somebody, you have to do the makeup in a way where it transforms somebody into a fly, a creature, or whatever. But the sci-fi horror films push that. And because they push that, you have better films, or you have movies that have better quality in makeup, that look more legit, more realistic. And a lot of people, they don't give the sci-fi horror films enough credit for what they were and what they are, Case in point, you don't see too many sci-fi horror films. I'm going to be jumping back and forth on this shit because, honestly, like, it's ideas are coming out right now. But, when you do see it, I mean, it's... For me, it's really a trip. It's always mind-boggling because it's like you never see it. And if you do see any of the new ones, they're typically on Sci-Fi Channel, made for Sci-Fi Channel, or they're made for Redbox movies, or straight to DVD, or straight to Netflix. And of course, they're all done on a budget and things like that. But if you see a really good quality one, I would say enjoy it, because that movie could be the one that pushes everything else. I mean, The Thing kind of really pushed it, with the effects and everything and the storytelling. And John Carpenter's fucking amazing. We all know that. But, for all these horror films, that's what they really did, you know? I'm, I'm kind of surprised that half of these films that I've listed, they were really fucking great, but they just never remade them. The only thing that they really remade was The Thing, and that was more of a prequel. Terminator, they just kind of went off in their own different sequels. They Live would be a great one, but I'm going to get into that one later on in the episode. Aliens, yeah, they just came out with a new one. It was pretty cool. It was alright. Predators, they're supposed to have a new one coming out in 2018, so we'll see how that is. Jury's still out on that. Faculty, I would love to see a fucking remake of Faculty. Y'all with me on this one? Let's remake Faculty, but do it right. You know, I know a lot of people are gonna fucking hate on remakes, but whatever, you know. I mean, Faculty was a great movie because my generation grew up with it, and if y'all are part of my generation, y'all know how it was in high school, and that movie was basically it. You know, it really was. But Faculty, I think, was also another good film that's very underrated. You don't see it too often, and when you do see it, buy that shit because it's a good movie. It really is. You know, but one that I really want to see, and you probably see, I know I'm babbling on and I got a couple minutes left, but anyways, a medical science horror film. You never see those, right? The closest thing that you see would be like Species, maybe more recent like Splice, but never that has to do with like medical science. Zombies in a way, yes, okay, but you never see it where somebody is like trying to play God and they build a new species and shit like that, and they do, you know, something went wrong and then it goes crazy and then it kills everybody and then they make sequels off of it. But you never see anything that has to deal with medical science. You know, there's Flatliners, but it's more, I would say that's more supernatural than science, because they were just trying to figure out if there's death and if there's a heaven, and you know, but you never see anything with medical science. You never do, you know. And honestly, like for me, I like sci-fi horror films. I want to know what you guys think about sci-fi horror films. Is the idea good? Is the idea bad? Should they tweak it up? Should they start remaking some of these films I was listing? You know what I'm saying? My opinion on all this is that it's a damn good idea if done right. You know, all the movies I just listed, I mean, right off the bat, those are all fucking charms. They're all great hits. They really are. And if you really want to do like a good sci-fi horror film, you know, case in point, not only am I talking about the medical science one, but, you know, they've already messed with it a little bit with Godzilla. You know, they were not torturing animals, but giving them serums and shit to make them grow, see what they can do, radioactive energy and all that shit. We've seen too much of that. I want to see something where they do the idea right. They basically mess with medical science. Something of abomination of a human comes out. And I know everyone's all saying, Resident Evil, Resident Evil, Resident Evil. Yeah, to a certain point. But I'm talking like, not a virus. We all know if they're making a virus, it's going to turn into something already. You know, I'm talking like, somebody wants to enhance their strength, you know, and then like, oh shit, got one arm bigger than the other, you know. Like, I could see all that happening, but it has to be done right. It really does, you know. There's probably some out there on Netflix, on Redbox. I haven't seen every horror film yet. That's on my bucket list at least, but, you know, food for thought. If you guys never been interested in sci-fi horror films, if you didn't think any of these films have a sci-fi twist, go back and watch them and see what you all think, and let me know in the comments. Let me know on my Facebook. Let me know on my Twitter. I'm all over. The SaWGuy ain't hard to find. You know, but I'm glad that you all enjoyed this episode. This really kind of mind messed with me a little bit, you know, with all the sci-fi twists and trying to figure out which one goes here and there, you know. But, you know, this was an interesting episode, and I was glad that I did this one, and I hope you all enjoyed this one. Anyways, I'm the SaWGuy, and that's all I got, and I'm out, y'all.